So let's start. And hello, my name is Eugene. I work for eBay in New York office. Before we start, disclaimer. This talk is an experience report with all the incident drama involved, so you've been warned. You can leave now if you want. The very first talk of this conference, like yesterday, given by Rory, was a nice nice talk, and one of the things he mentioned was that don't be afraid of trying new things, but don't also forget about your team, about people in your team. And this talk is sort of resonates with this idea, and that's sort of my experience, what I do in such cases. And let's start. At eBay, I work for the team which is responsible, can you hear me? Which is responsible for this so-called content auction server. So for some given page on ebay.com, there's some placements where we can distribute some content. And once the page loads, it calls the server and it says like, okay, I need some content for placements 1 and 2. What can you give me? And we run non-binding auction, asking all interested parties and like what sort of content you can put here. And content can be like third-party ad, first-party ad, like first-party recommendation, whatever. And we just run this auction and serve something based on that, and we can decide like what is the best answer, what is the best content for that particular page, for that particular user, based on whatever we think is best. And one of the cross-cutting concerns of that is collecting tracking data. And if you are not familiar with tracking, it's you can think of that as sort of, this is where like big data generates, where something happens during this auction and we want to collect valuable pieces of information, like who participated in that particular auction, who won the auction, what was the price, what was like floor price. So we get in lots of small things like key value, and we put it somewhere, and we get in tons of that, and we can run analytics and figure out how we can do better, like how we can optimize this or that, things like that. And originally we thought like, okay, tracking, that looks very similar to login, right? So you kind of do something, you have like main business logic, and then this is like sort of infrastructural thing. And here's a quick example. Run auction takes some sequence of bids, returns potential winner, and it takes also implicit tracker alongside with the logger. And here's some, like for comparison, the tracker can be represented as something like has a bunch of methods, track, key, and some value. Here are just 2 of them. And the logger. And the similarity is that they just return unit. We do something with it and looks similar, okay. And it sort of worked when Codebase, like it was a new project, Codebase was small, and we had just 1 auction per request, and only a few values need to be tracked, like very key things. And we, of course, covered everything with unit tests, including logging. And we sort of liked how it looked from the calls. On the call side, you have your just run auction, you pass bids, get a winner, and all this like infrastructural things get passed implicitly. So that looked cool. Life was good. And then it's kind of stopped working. So Codebase was growing, and we were adding more and more important stuff to be tracked, and then we can handle multiple auctions per request, and each auction became like multiple tier thing, and some of those tiers not very trivial. And it started to feel awkward, and we had some issues with that, and we decided, okay, let's get together as a team and figure out like what's wrong and how we gonna fix it. And problem number 1 we had was that tracken is not login. And while they can look very similar, you can think of that losing login like partially or even completely for some time. It's not pleasant, not good, but you will survive. You don't have to lose value. I mean, especially if nothing bad happens, like who cares about logs? And if you can make some revenue lift based on your tracking because of the analytics and some data processing, then losing some tracking can be super expensive and very visible, even like for a short period of time. And by the way, for those, I've got this feedback before, for those who see two teddy bears here, we have a puppy and a teddy bear here. So like login and tracking, they're similar but very different in the nature. Another thing we didn't like about that implementation was that we had some shared mutable state. And you see this like track which returns units, so it mutates something, it keeps it for the life of the auction, and at the end of the auction it sends it to some tracking service, whatnot. And of course, like it's not super hard to do it right here, like you use some concurrent collection, it's short-lived object, but everyone knows like shared mutable state is bad, so it's better to avoid it from the beginning. So kind of the big one, which was, we said, okay, it's just messy. It's sort of many things we combined under that, and we said, first, you don't know what really happens with this track unit. Does it send something somewhere? Does it like store something to disk? Does it call your mom in Australia? Who knows? I mean, it's just a unit. So, and to add, it's like idempotency issue. Like if you retry something, you may end up with like tracking something twice, or like you just calling something twice. So we said like, okay, we admit that tracking is important to us, and that's sort of part of our business logic, and we want to be able to represent that in types instead of hiding and calling that into structural code. We just want to express that. And I was one on the quest to implement that, and I was, okay, we'll do something about it. And then the first idea I got was like, you know, something simple, like I'll just use TUPLE. And here's a simple example. We have tracking package and like package object. We define one alias for tracking data, which is a vector of tuples string key and to any, very type safe. And then you have another type alias tracked of A, which is represent this tuple of A plus the tracking data associated with that A. And it looks nice, like on this slide. And then I just like realized very quickly, without even writing too much code, that oh wait, we'll need to compose those tracked. We'll need to, you know, add more tracking data to something like that. So in short, we'll need to flat map that thing all the time. And the tuple is, it is possible, but it's not the best way to do that. So then I thought, okay, maybe it is time for writer monad. And is there anyone who doesn't know what writer monad is? Okay, a couple of people, that's good. So for those people, I'm just show you some quotes instead of telling you what that is. Writer is a monad that lets us carry a log along with the computation. We can use it to record messages, errors, or additional data about computation and extract the log alongside the final result. It's a nice book, recommended. And here's another one. It's also a great book. Learn Your Haskell for Great Good. Writer monad is for values that have another value attached that acts as a sort of a log value. Writer allows us to do computation while making sure that all the log values are combined into one log value that then gets attached to the result. If it's not clear, and I know it can be not clear when you just read it for the first time, here's a quick example using CATS writer implementation. We're gonna use string as the log. So first, like imports you need, and then we can define two writers, W1, W2. Sorry. So the log is got2, got3, and values 2 and 3 respectively. Okay. And then you can just throw that in for comprehension and like add some additional like login to that and sum the values. And at the end we get in this like W, and you can run it and get as advertised result alongside with the log, or log alongside with the result, which is got2, got3, sum is, and result is 5. So it looks like exactly what we needed. Great fit. But then again, let's get back to reality. That kind of I work in eBay, which is a big international company, and we have lots of smart people, but lots of them like kind of have enterprise Java background, and majority of those people, they are not familiar with typed FP at all. And it's not like they are bad developers, it's just new to them, and new things, they can look strange and sometimes scary. And when you work in a team bigger than like 2 people, then you need to think of, you don't want to get in the position where like you are the only one who can touch the code, and like no one wants to touch it again because you used some strange things there. So, and I bet like many of you heard like horror stories like that. My Uncle Joe worked on a project where someone used ScalaZ, and on Friday 13 at midnight, ScalaZ ate all the sane code and left only dark magic spells full of weird runes instead. So, I mean, you can replace ScalaZ with CATS to some degree, and I personally heard like lots of stories like that, and I've read like blogs and like presentations from CTOs talking about things like that. So, and my team is very diverse in terms of like experience with typed FP and even with the Scala as a language. Some people are just new to that, and they need to learn Scala stuff, and you don't want to throw them to ScalaZ or CATS. So I wanted to find a some compromise. Like I want to use like a writer, but make it less, I guess, like less alien for people, which I work with. So I thought, okay, writer as a concept is a good thing. So what do? Do I rewrite it? Do I write my own writer, which is like will be super specific, which doesn't expose like very generic interface, and thus easier to understand? Or do I reuse the existing one like ScalaZ or CATS like we saw? And we had CATS in our class path. We used non-empty list as the only abstraction we used from it, but it well worth it. So, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna try writer, and let's see what I can do for that. And this is an example of how you would encode that instead of like similar to what we had with the tuple slide. Here we have type tracked, which is now writer of tracking data and A. And then, okay, that also looked nice. And then, okay, how do I encode that? There are some questions I had to answer when I started to write in code. And one of those was like, okay, how do we create those tracked with and without? Oh, wow. What was I was talking to nowhere before? I like hear myself. Okay, how to create tracked or with or without tracking data? And someone said, yeah, sure, like pure from applicative or like something like that. But again, that's, if you think of showing that to other people, maybe not the best idea to start with. And I thought, okay, I'll do something, some sort of DSL. We have an implicit class, any to track, I mean, name doesn't matter, which has pretty much two methods: tracking, which takes tracking data, and tracking nothing, which takes nothing. Naming is hard, I admit it. And this is the dev side, and here you can see example on the call side. If we have some method reduce bids that takes bids and some floor price and can produce optional winner, and we have a way to get some tracking for this floor price, with the import from tracking package, we can chain them pretty much and get reduced bids and tracking floor price data. And result would be tracked optional winner, which has the winner and all the tracking information we gathered for floor price. Another very similar question: how to append tracking data to already existing tracked value. And it's very similar, kind of overloading, sort of. You have another tracking in another implicit class which wraps tracked already and delegates to tell. Tell is a kind of writer-specific method which does what needs to be done here to add more logs. And very similar again, how do you extract it? As you saw in the example, we can run it, and or you can have like an extractor, which pretty much does it. You know, I hope people familiar with extractors, right? So that should be. I don't have like samples of the call side, but you can imagine you can just write val tracked and then like log data and just give it some tracked, and it will extract it. And another more specific question, I guess more interesting question, was like how to compose those writers in the presence of other monoids like futures, tries, ethers, whatnot. And what do you say? Someone said monoid transformers? No? No one said? That's definitely an option. You can use monoid transformers for that, but again, like if you listen to my talk from the beginning, I didn't want to start like new horror story right there, just introducing like this sort of DSL and then throw monoid transformers to that. So I thought, why don't we just use like good old map and FLATMAP? As according to myself, 99% of people who code in Scala, they get addicted to maps and FLATMAPs very quickly. They are ubiquitous in Scala, and some of those like 99% of the people may not know that these are just like bigger parts of something, smaller parts of something bigger, and they may not know how they work, as long as they like understand what they do. So, for example, this is a flat map on the writer. This is the signature exactly from the source code. So, flat map view takes function f from v to writer t FLU, and it takes additionally flat map of f and semigroup of L, and returns with writer t. So if you see that first time and you don't know what semigroup is, or like flat map, the flat map looks similar to that flat map, but it's the uppercase flat map, and there's f there. And why is there like writer t instead of writer? I don't know. It can look strange. And here's another one. This is from the standard library Traversable. I guess we all kind of get used to it when we like use it more and more, and like, but a similar question appeared like more than once, and you can find like traces of that in like Stack Overflow and like all of the Google can build from. What the hell is that? And but the main thing kind of here is here's the contract for FLATMAP, and that's what matter. Like, we may not know how, what it needs, like some other dependency, something, but as long as we see that, and if you see that in the code, you see like a flat map, okay, I know what it does. It takes this f of a to f of b and just flattens that to f of b. Okay, it makes sense. And going back to like example, so let's say if we have run auction, which takes bits and returns you this tracked option winner. And somehow we got this future of tracked bits. So we can just do map on the future, and inside of that we have this tracked, and we flat map with the run auction. It works. It looks similar to what you do in a collection. It's not scary. People can read that and say, yeah, I understand that. So another more specific question that was more specific to kind of the logic. So without writer, once you have something like sequence of bits, and then you want to like combine them all together, you just do flatten on it, and you're golden, you're done. What happens like when you add writer? So just to simplify and like fit the code, I introduced like another type as tracked bits. It's a tract of sequence of bits. And if you have sequence of those tracked bits and you want to combine and just get tracked bits, what do you do here? Any ideas? All right, there is a good answer from CATS.TRAVERSE. And CATS.TRAVERSE has exactly the thing you need, which is called flat sequence. And here let's pretend that cats provide instances, type class instances for sequence, which it doesn't. But again, vector would not fit into the slide, so sequences here. So you can do that. You can say, okay, I need CATS.TRAVERSE and traverse sequence flat sequence, and it just works. It's magically does what it needs to be done. But again, I thought like, okay, I'm gonna do that and I'm gonna show that, but I also will have like backup plan. And backup plan is use non-value, like zero value, which is empty sequence of bits with tracking nothing, and merge, which takes two tracked bits, which are, if you remember, like tracked of sequence of bits. And then through for comprehension, it just extracts values and compose them. So it's actually monadic composition all over the tracker, all over the writer, sorry. So, and then the flatten is just fold left with the none as 0 and merges the operation. And I showed that like on the code review with the team. I like was explaining, oh, here's we do this, do that, and like, and by the way, the flatten we can do either traverse or this thing. And democratic voting showed that people preferred this, though it's some duplication, some more code to write, but people said like, we know what fold left is, and that looks easier to understand for us. Okay, that's okay. That's learning process. That there's nothing wrong with that. And one more thing, MONOID. For all that code to work, as we saw earlier, FLATMAP on the writer wants a semigroup, right? And we all know every MONOID is a semigroup. So, and we have to give it somehow. So the nice solution was to put that in this same package object, the val MONOID, and if we would go with the traverse for flattening, that will also work for that. So defining that, I allowed for all that code I showed you before to compile without sort of no mentioning writer or any CATS code in our business logic. So I sort of ended up with hiding all the complexity of the writer, which is a simple concept, but from my standpoint, although like many of those nice simple concepts, they intertangled. Like for example, yeah, writer is cool, but then you need to like semigroup, and then like, oh, you need FLATMAP, and then you quickly, oh, okay, sorry. And then you end up with like, oh, now we need to learn all the CATS to just use something like that. So that helped me to kind of hide everything except maps and flat maps. And if you just see them in the code, they are similar. They are similar to like any maps and flat maps because we know the contract. And one other thing which I didn't think of, but one of the team members mentioned, like, oh look, we can just replace this CATS writer with ScalaZ writer or with anything else without changing a bit of our domain code, because all we do is just like import this tracked package object, and we have all these goodies. And some people will say, okay, that looks not right. You had an abstraction, but you didn't use it. You kind of used something else. But again, you've been warned at the beginning. That is the experience report. That is like real people involved here, people who didn't know what those things are, and they said, yeah, that looks good, we can live with that. We can support that code, and we can learn little by little things. And I don't think it's wrong. Apparently, I did it. I just think it's a baby steps. It's a way you can try to sell, if you're lucky, type of P to enterprise, things like that. And it sort of worked for my team, for myself. Yeah, I think I'm super quick on that, so that's all I have. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Hi, I have a question. It's not exactly topic related, but it's more of this this approach in general. For instance, I have a team that got used, well, like in your case, got used to regular Scala library, and how do I explain them that we should really move to this abstraction? We should stick to using CATS, and well, all of them. Maybe you could have. Could provide some recommendation on that.
So I don't need to repeat these, right? Because like everyone heard the question. Okay, so you can't explain. That's the answer. So the only thing which works is an example. So because when you start explaining to people, and then you have to say, okay, we're gonna use a writer or something like in this case, we're gonna use writer, and they're like, wait, what? Why? Okay, and then you say, yeah, writer, it's simple. You have like log and value, and like look at that, like for comprehension, just works. And they're like, oh really? And then they start like poking at that, and they see, oh, this like Semigroup, and like what is Semigroup? And like some people are curious. They're like, yeah, I want to learn all that stuff and gonna use it. And some people say like, I mean, maybe not. That's too many things to learn and like to bring at the same time. So what I find works for me, and that in cases like that, you just do it. You just do it. You try to sell it kind of in an aggressive way. You don't explain and like ask for permission. You just do it and say, hey guys, and for you to feel more comfortable, I did this sort of DSL. And like for those who like in that example with Traverse, right? You can see the benefit of using Traverse. It's just one line, and you can even inline that. You don't need this like flatten method on tracked bids. It just works, and it's a nice concept. But then people, no, we wanna use like this more verbose code with FOLDLEFT and this none and like merge. So you say, okay, you can do some compromises, but I guess the idea is you just do it and show, and then they learn it. It's already there. They learn it, and you need to be there to support people, to explain it. Ideally, run some educational sessions or something, one piece at a time. That's very important, I think. Baby steps, pretty much, baby steps. Thank you.